Hello and welcome to the best kept home buying secrets in Florida real estate. My name is Eve Alexander and I am the broker for Buyers Broker of Florida in Orlando, and I am so glad that you were able to join us today for this tell-all webinar. Now, this is not going to be a typical webinar where there's nothing but fluff, no substance, and it goes on forever. This will be fast-paced, exciting, because all our stories are true, might even be shocking. But you will for sure learn tips that will save you money, make you a smarter home buyer, while you learn the truth about what really goes on behind the scenes of a real estate transaction in Florida. So, I'm going to start out by giving you my 3 guarantees. First of all, I'm not selling anything, so please put your wallets away because I'm not going to need your money. And you are going to hear juicy tidbits that you have never heard before. And this 55-minute webinar will be a daring look behind the scenes of Florida home buying. So before we get started, I'm going to ask that you please put your cell phones on airplane mode and ignore your text messages for a bit, because I plan to move very quickly and you are not going to want to miss any of this. So who is this for? It's for the serious property buyer who wants insider information and the truth. It's for the home buyer who wants to save time, money, and effort. And also, it's for anyone that's worried about making the wrong decision when they're buying a home. On this webinar, you will learn the best kept secrets that realtors don't talk about, tips for home buyers to avoid costly mistakes, and that is everyone's favorite, proven strategies to get your offer accepted. You're going to learn who to trust or not to trust, and shocking facts about Central Florida brokers. So be sure to stay until the end so you can learn the insider tips that no one else will tell you. Plus, you will receive a 35-page Florida home buyer's guide, custom home searches sent to your inbox if you prefer, and also an optional complimentary phone consultation that you will be able to book later on in this webinar. So does this sound like you? Are you undecided about buying a home? Don't know how to start? Unsure of what to buy? Not sure of how much to spend? Worried about losing money? So how much time are you spending wondering about the area that you might not know anything about? Or wasting calls calling on properties that are way over your budget? Viewing homes that really don't fit your needs? And are you worried that you're overpaying? Or maybe that you might overpay? Do you lose sleep over that one? The real problem is that you just don't know what you don't know. You don't know how to select a community, evaluate property, make an offer, ask for concessions, what to negotiate or renegotiate. In fact, you don't even know if the agent showing you homes is even working for you. But lucky for you, we know everything that you don't. And if you understand the real estate game, you will be empowered, feel relaxed and confident. You won't overpay, and you will buy a better investment with less headache. So yes, you can. Of course you can. You can create a smart home buying strategy by using what you will learn today. And when you do this, you'll be confident. Just stop worrying. You will live your dream. About me. I've been an outspoken buyer agency pioneer for over 25 years. I've owned and managed the largest buyer brokerage office in the state of Florida, and actually the second largest in the United States. I've been awarded the Buyer Broker of the Year for saving home buyers money. I've been the Eastern Region Director for the National Association of Exclusive Buyer Agents. I've chaired professional standards, grievance education. I'm a registered residential appraiser, plus I have 10 advanced certifications. Now, most agents don't have a single certification, so if you have 10, that's really a lot, and it's a lot of classroom work. I've been an instructor for contracts, agency, agent duties, and negotiations, and I'm a court-recognized expert witness for consumer lawsuits against real estate agents. Now, I'm not telling you all this to brag because it really doesn't matter, but I do want you to understand that I did not get a license yesterday, and I do know what I'm talking about. So why did I get a real estate license? Well, in 1991, my husband and I decided to buy our first investment property. My dad had owned a couple rentals and he thought they were a good idea, so that sounded good to us. So we called around on newspaper ads and finally bought a one-bedroom condo for $37,000. Now, the agent seemed nice enough, but when I wanted advice on what to offer, he told us we need to pay full price. And I said, "No, come on, seriously. Really, what should we offer?" And he said, "You need to pay $37,000." Well, I didn't quite understand that, but nonetheless, we paid $37,000, which was full price. So during the transaction, I was told that the seller received an assessment from the condo association for painting the buildings and doing other maintenance of $6,000, but the seller was going to be generous and pay half. We were only going to be responsible for the other half. The agent told us we were lucky. And you know what? I felt like we were lucky. Right up until before closing, when I learned that the agent was actually the half owner of the property. Oh my gosh. I thought he was our agent and was going to help us, and he was actually the seller. Of course, he didn't tell us that. So when I got the settlement statement, the charges were more than I expected, but I didn't know what was reasonable or whether I was being overcharged or undercharged. And later on, when I asked the title company about the charges, they said that the seller told them that we offered to pay some of the seller's closing costs. Now, of course, that wasn't true, but at the time, I didn't know that. So, in fact, I ended up paying about $5,000 more than I should have simply because I was naive and I took the word of an unscrupulous agent. Now, I know that $5,000 may not sound like a lot to some of you, but I didn't have a lot of money. So to me, it was big bucks. And more importantly, it was dishonest. The way I look at things is this. I don't care if it's $50,000, $5,000, $500, or $5. If it's dishonest, it shouldn't happen. So after the closing, I started to dig for information and quickly realized that I'd been cheated. Now, I felt like I'd been cheated, but I wasn't sure. But I learned that the maintenance assessments were the seller's legal obligation to pay and not mine. And I should have scrutinized the closing costs that I was being overcharged for. I felt really stupid. Dumb Eve. I felt like I should have known better. But it woke me up to the fact that I really didn't know anything about real estate. And I wanted to be smarter for the next time. So I decided to get a real estate license. Now, I had no intent of becoming a real estate agent, but I decided to hang my license with a friend so I could keep the commission on the next investment property. One thing led to another, and I started working part-time in a real estate office as a traditional realtor. And you know what? I hated it. I worked in a traditional office where the consensus was that buyers are liars and agents have to list to last. So I tried listing property, and man, was I lousy at it. Sellers typically interview several agents and list their property with a person that tells them everything they want to hear. Sellers want agents that love, love, love their house. And it's so beautiful, and we can get you more than you ever thought you could get for your house. Now, I was raised to always tell the truth, and I didn't know how to pretend. I could spot property deficiencies before even getting inside the house, and I was a truth teller. So as I'm walking up to the door to ring the doorbell, I am checking out the roof line and looking at all the rotten wood. So the last appointment I went on, the seller told me that his house was worth more than my comps because he had brand new carpet. Well, you know, he did have brand new carpet, but it was hot pink. And I'm serious, it was hot, hot pink. So I politely packed up my briefcase and headed for the door and went back to the office, where my broker was not happy with me. He tried to convince me that I needed to learn how to puff up the seller's property, but I just couldn't do it. I was, however, good with buyers, and I genuinely liked working with them. So I started taking advanced real estate classes, and I signed up for a class on buyer representation that was taught by an instructor from out of state. Now, I had no idea what that meant, but I was interested in learning more. Almost immediately, there was hostility in the class towards the teacher, and they started arguing with him. Some thought it was crazy, it would never work, and one agent even said there should be a law against, or this should be against the law because no one should be allowed to be on the buyer's side. Now, I didn't understand what everybody was in an uproar about because I thought it made perfect sense. I work with the buyer, I get to know the buyer, I like the buyer, so why should I not work for the buyer? I was totally sold on the idea and actually was excited at the thought of doing real estate by representing the buyer, and I was ready to hop on board. But little did I know what was really waiting ahead for me. So about the same time, I started working with a young military couple who just got out of service and they're buying their first home. They were doing a VA loan and scraping pennies to be able to purchase a $76,000 property. And I decided to try representing the buyer's best interest instead of representing the sellers like everyone else did. Now, the inspection revealed several deficiencies. It had a leaky roof, washer dryer didn't work, and it had some rotten windows. So I requested that all the items be repaired before closing. The listing agent said that the seller was willing to fix it all. But then the listing agent went to the Bahamas on vacation and no one told the sellers that they had repairs to do, so nothing had been done. So the sellers come down for closing and they learned that they were supposed to do some things, and they said they weren't going to fix anything. Now, I knew that wasn't right, but I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to do or even what I was supposed to say, but I really understood one thing. I was on my own. So at the closing table, I refused to close until there was money set aside for my buyers for the needed repairs. We negotiated for more than 2 hours until I finally got a credit for the buyers of $3,500, and I had worked up a major headache, but I really felt good about what I accomplished. In fact, this was the first time I felt good about any real estate transaction. So I knew right then and there that representing home buyers was exactly what I was cut out to do. So since I was excited about the thought of representing buyers, I set out to do just that. Ironically, the real estate office that I was with had just merged with a large franchise office, but they were not going to allow buyer representation because they considered that taboo. So I started interviewing with other offices, and every office wanted to hire me, but not a single office would allow me to represent buyers. I heard things like, "You must be kidding. Why would you waste your time on buyers?" By the time I finished my fourth interview, I was already planning on opening up my own buyer agency office. I realized that no one got it, and even if I found an office that was okay with it, I'd have a major conflict of interest working in an office where I would be expected to push the company listings. So 1 year later, with a new broker's license, we opened up for Buyers Only Realty in Fort Lauderdale, and we were open for business. But we never expected the hate, the backlash, and the resistance we got from the traditional agent world. They simply wanted us out of business. We were refused showings and not allowed to submit offers. We were spit on, cussed out, had bricks thrown at our office windows, our tires were slashed, and we were paged hundreds of times a day. Vulgar messages were left on our phone, and we even received hate mail. Now, I didn't take this personal because, we were changing things, and nobody likes change. We were changing the way real estate was done. Up until that point, everybody represented the seller, both agents represented the seller, and no one was looking to see if the buyer was getting anything they contracted for. Besides that, we were not the only office feeling this heat. Another buyer agency office in Palm Beach County was broken into, and all the files were stolen. In Sarasota, an exclusive buyer agency office was firebombed, and they had to move. In North Carolina, 2 buyer broker ladies were run off a mountain road. And in South Carolina, the buyer agents were refused access to MLS. But to add insult to injury, we were doing no business. We weren't taking anybody's business away. We had no business. Real estate publications would not accept our ads because they were threatened with boycotts from the traditional world. And home buyers, well, they had no clue we existed. So no money was coming in. We were living off of our savings, and trust me, it was dwindling fast. So we had a decision to make. Do we quit the business like the other buyer agency offices were all doing? or do we stay? Well, you know how the saying goes. They say tough times don't last, but tough people do. So we sold our 4-bedroom house, sold the horses, sold the Corvette, and moved into a 1-bedroom condo that we owned because we needed the money to keep the office open. We learned how to knock on doors and present our own contracts, and we basically challenged anyone that tried to stop us. The law was on our side. Buyers have the right to be represented, and we had the right to represent them. So after a while, they started leaving us alone. I think we were probably too much trouble for them. And in 1994, the state of Florida came out with mandatory agency disclosures. Now, all agents had to tell a buyer who they really represented, which of course was a seller. So all of a sudden, every traditional agent started stamping their business card with the words buyer's agent on it. And almost overnight, the animosity towards buyer agents disappeared. Today, there's no hostility left because many offices practice a watered version of buyer representation. Florida today also has no mandatory disclosures. So let me repeat this part and hear this. What that means is that brokers no longer have to tell you that they don't work for you. And I am going to bet that you have never heard that one before. So here I was in my own little office doing absolutely no business. I came in promptly every day waiting for the phone to ring, but it never did. I was so eager to start working. So in walks this assertive lady, her name was Mary, and she asked for my resume. Well, I didn't have a resume. And if I had a resume, it would not have had anything on it because I was a very green broker who knew very little about real estate. And my closings up to date, I could count on one hand. Anyway, she told me she was an investor who just fired her realtor, and she asked me if I could hustle for her because she wanted to buy more properties. Well, heck yeah, I could do that. I wasn't afraid of hard work. What I learned rather quickly was that she knew more about real estate than I did, and I was the one with the license. She was hard-nosed, intimidating, and super smart. We started looking at properties priced from $5,000 to $20,000, and you can just imagine what they look like. I remember the first property that we looked at was a condo, painted all black inside with maggots so bad that we both ran outside to gag. Now, this condo had black ceilings, black walls, black carpet, and maggots. You can imagine. The next property was also a condo where I handed her the keys so I could watch my car from the catwalk. I was really worried that someone would steal my tires and we wouldn't have a quick getaway. Anyway, I disclosed to her that there were bullet holes in the bedroom window, but she was unfazed. She had already seen that. As an ex-cop and now private investigator, nothing bothered her. She only wanted to know what she could rent it out for and how much she might net. Making money was her only consideration. So we were able to buy that condo for $9,500 cash, and she almost made more than that on rent the first year. My entire commission on the transaction was only $500. But I was not complaining. I was finally doing real business, and what I learned from her was absolutely priceless. She told me to look at investment properties strictly from a money perspective. If she could make money, she was interested. She never cared whether or not the property was in the right zip code or it had a good floor plan. Her theory was, if you're not going to live in the property, why does it need to be pretty or perfect? I ended up selling her dozens of properties all over the state of Florida, as she will not buy a home without me, and today we are still friends and I still sell her properties, except now they are higher priced homes on Deepwater. I also finally know a lot more about real estate than she does. So at the end of the seminar, you are going to feel no stress and no confusion. The big question is, isn't it time to spend your money wisely? How to become a savvy home buyer in 3 pillars. Well, first of all, you have to choose the right agent. You have to know what to buy. You have to make smart offers and avoid costly mistakes. So let's start with the realtor's best kept secret. And I know that, well, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking that it's how much commission they're making. But nope, It's not that. It's who they really work for. Agents don't want to tell the buyer that they work for the seller because their job isn't to help you, it's to put more money in the seller's pocket. The scariest thing is that in Florida, there's no mandatory agency disclosures, and I mentioned that just earlier. Agents don't have to tell you who they're working for. So most times buyers don't understand this. They automatically assume if somebody puts them in their car and shows them property that they're going to advocate for them. Not true. And then a problem comes up and the buyer realizes that there really is no one on their side. So next, I'm going to make it real simple for you to understand the agent relationships so that you can become a savvy home buyer. So agent relationships in Florida. Now, most brokers in Florida work as transaction brokers. And when I say most, I mean like 99.9% work as transaction brokers, which means they facilitate a transaction with no loyalty to either party. So they actually assist, they don't advocate. Then there's also seller's agent who work for the seller's highest price, which is totally contrary to what you want. And those are the people that have the sign in the yard, so you might try not to call them. Or you can work with a buyer's agent in a listing office where there's a potential for conflict of interest. Now, the reason I say there's a potential for conflict of interest is because a listing office has already promised the seller that they would get the most favorable terms for them, the highest price, and that they're going to represent them, and that they're going to take care of them. So now you come along as a buyer, and how are you going to get your fair shake? Well, more than likely, they're going to want to represent the two of you as a transaction broker, which means no fiduciary duties. You also have the option to work with an exclusive buyer agent in a buyer-only office. Now, this is an office that never represents sellers. They don't list property. They don't market homes, but they have access to anything and everything out there, just like every other office, except their whole focus is to take care of the home buyer. So they offer 100% loyalty, confidentiality, and full disclosure. So why do you care about loyalty? Well, let's put it this way. If you don't have somebody loyal, that means you have no one on your side. And the seller already has a seller's agent, and if you don't have someone looking out for you, you're going to get the short end of the stick. Confidentiality. What that means is that, for instance, I will never tell the listing agent who my buyer is, what they do for a living, how much money they have, how badly they want the house, or how much they're willing to pay. The less the listing office and the seller know, the easier it is to negotiate a contract. And then there's full disclosure. What does that mean? It means the good and the bad and the ugly. That means there's no secrets. Let me give you an example of that. So I showed a house to a buyer and they liked it. And the listing agent called me to see how the buyer liked it. And I said, by the way, what are they doing with that dirt road behind the house that dead ends into the property? And she says, oh, yeah, that. She says, they're building a four-way highway, and you're going to be able to get to Disney really quick, and you can get to here, and you can get to there. And I said, yeah, but the buyer's not going to like that. And she says, well, don't tell the buyer. Well, you know what? I tell the buyer everything. I tell the buyer everything, and if they don't want to buy the property, they don't have to. They can move on to something else. Now, the interesting thing about whoever you do hire is that everyone gets paid the same. It doesn't cost any more or any less to pick any one of these. The commission is already included in the price of the property, and it's split between the real estate agent that lists it and the real estate agent that sells it. So there's no additional monies that the buyer has to pay to have someone represent them 100%. So experts recommend using exclusive buyer agents. And these are experts that actually study real estate. They study the law. They study everything. Like Consumer Reports, Consumer Federation of America, Smart Money, New York Times, Money Magazine, Orlando Sentinel, Kiplinger's Business Week. These people all recommend using exclusive buyer agent because there's no conflict of interest. And I have never read an article that says you shouldn't use an exclusive buyer agent. The only complaint that I've heard is that there's not that many of us out there, and that's true. In Florida, there's about 300,000 realtors, and less than 50 are exclusive buyer agents. So why are there so few of us? Because it takes a high level of confidence to give up half of the business of not listing properties, and it requires a high level of competence to stay in business without having any for sale signs in front of homes, which of course everybody knows that's what drives business in the door. And this is also why exclusive buyer brokers have been in business a minimum of 10 years, and many have advanced designations, because they simply have to have superior knowledge of real estate and a strong understanding of property values in the surrounding cities. Because exclusive buyer agents go where the buyer needs to go, and they don't farm a certain area or stay in a geographical area. And most importantly, they work in a unique buyer agency office that never represents a seller. They never act as a transaction broker, and they never try to represent two parties in the same transaction, which also means that they will never double dip the commission. So yes, it's a very specialized niche only for home buyers. Choosing the right agent is the most important factor in your satisfaction. Now, we talked about the different kinds of realtors, and all these realtors have different duties. Some represent sellers, some buyers, and some try to represent both. And you can just guess that representing both the buyer and seller means that neither one is really getting an advocate, which is why attorneys never represent two parties with opposing interests. So if you want someone to help you get the best price, don't call the agent on the sign, because they work for the seller. And you also don't look for a buyer's agent in a listing office. So here's a shocker. A buyer's agent in a listing office may have a legal obligation to push their company listings, and maybe even get a better commission split if they sell you that company listings. Of course, you're never going to know that because they're never going to tell you. Now, the first broker that I worked for was a traditional brokerage, and if I sold a company listing, I got 0.5% more of commission. And if I had the buyer and seller in the transaction, I got my name up on the bulletin board with a gold star. And here's some more shocking facts about Central Florida realtors, and I'm not making this up. This is reported by the Orlando Regional Realtor Association. 38% of realtors have been in business less, that's LESS, than 1 year. Only 64% have sold one or more homes last year. What that means is that 36% of realtors did not even sell a single property last year. So does experience matter? Well, let me ask you this. How good can someone be that isn't doing any business or just got a license? In every real estate transaction, there's red flags, controversies, disputes, negotiations, and renegotiations. There are many things that pop up that takes an experienced agent to resolve. For example, Erika had 2 construction issues happen just in the past few months. One of them was that a week before closing, the builder sent the buyer a letter stating that they were going to charge the buyer an extra $800 because the builder's rep undercharged the buyer for a staircase. Now, Erika, the exclusive buyer agent, she didn't hesitate for a minute. She sent an email to the builder's agent, the title agent, and the closer, letting them know that the buyer was not going to pay 1 penny more. Builders can't arbitrarily change a contract once it's signed, and of course the builder knew this, so which is why he dropped his request for the extra $800. Now think of this. If you had an inexperienced agent, what do you think they would have told you? Well, I think they would have probably just said, the builder wants the $800, how are you going to pay them? And you know what? You probably would pay them. Last month on a walkthrough with a builder's rep on a townhouse, Erika noticed flaws in the floor tile. Now, no one else noticed, the builder's rep didn't notice, and not even the buyer. but she had them redo the entire floor with a new batch of tiles. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why experience does matter. Not only does an experienced buyer broker notice things like that, but they're not afraid to speak up and make things right for the buyer. Case study 3, do sellers lie? Well, let me ask you this, do people lie? Someone once told me that given the right situation, everyone will lie. So let's face it, buying a home is a costly proposition, and more than likely, the seller stands to either lose money or make some money. And net profit to a seller is everything. You have a seller who wants to get rid of the property, and they don't want you to learn everything that's wrong with it because they're afraid you're going to walk away from the transaction. And trust me on this, and remember this forever. The seller always needs to sell more than you need to buy. Rule number 1, don't trust or believe anything the seller says. I recently closed a deal where the seller's disclosure said that the roof was replaced 10 years ago. I checked with permitting and learned that the roof was replaced 15 years ago, not 10. Now, some of you probably think it's not a big deal, but in Florida, the life expectancy of a roof is about 15 years, and the insurance company will more than likely want a roof that old replaced. So do you think that the seller who put on the roof 15 years ago really thought it was only 10 years old? Not a chance. Not in my book. Here's some more stories. Buyers are buying a nice house and they hit it off with a seller, so much so that they go to breakfast together and start communicating during the transaction. I told the buyers not to become friendly and keep the sellers at arm's length, but I was too late. Buyers thought the sellers were wonderful, and I was just a worrywart. Day of closing, I realized that the brand new side-by-side refrigerator is gone, along with the brand new washer and dryer. Seller signed all the closing documents the day before, and they were already across state lines, of course, with the buyer's appliances. Now, the seller's response was that during breakfast, the buyers told them they didn't want any of those things. The buyers say they never had that conversation. Besides, why would anyone not want brand new appliances? We've had many instances where sellers have removed appliances, ceiling fans, bathroom mirrors, lighting fixtures, the security system from the walls, ceiling, and even the pavers in the driveway. But no, we did not let them get by with it. Sellers lie about roof leaks, roof repairs, pulling permits, the cost of their upgrades, and they keep silent about old septic tanks, or if they filed an insurance claim for anything. We've had sellers stuff towels in leaking water heaters, put buckets in the attic for roof leaks, and then claim everything's fixed. In a couple instances, they even provided us with a fake receipt. Rule number 2, don't bother asking the listing agent. They typically disclose very little. After all, their duty is to protect the seller. It's not to tell you, the buyer, about any house problems. So listing agents will usually claim they don't know. So here's a good septic story that just happened actually last week. The buyer wanted to buy a house, but they did not want anything with the septic. They wanted city water. And so before they make an offer on the property, Erika checks with the listing agent, and she says, is the property on septic? The listing agent says, no, it's on city water and city sewer. And so they agree on price and terms. They go to do inspections, and at inspections, Erika's looking at the street and wondering why there's no manhole covers for, like, city stuff. So she texts the agent and she says, please ask the seller if the property is on septic. And the agent texts back and she says, seller said there's no septic. Okay, well, to make a long story short, it was on septic. The buyers did a septic inspection, and when they do a septic inspection, the septic people come out there and they pump all the sludge out of everything. So they came out there, took the lid off, which was cracked, and find a tree inside. Now, I'm not talking about a few branches or a few little bit of dirt. There was a tree growing inside this septic tank. So they closed it up. They wouldn't pump it. They wouldn't do anything. And also we learned that The sellers had added a bathroom, and now the drain field was not the required size. It wasn't big enough to handle all the bathrooms that they had in this property. So do sellers lie? Well, let me backtrack a minute. How long do you think the seller had this property? A week or two? No, he owned the property for 2 years. Now, in the 2 years of not getting any water bill, do you think that he really didn't know he was on septic? So the question is, do sellers lie? You better believe it, which is exactly why you need an experienced agent on your side. So what to buy? Do you need it or just gotta have it? Most home buyers have an idea what they want to buy and how much they want to spend, but I also find that most buyers always assume they're going to get more for their money than their budget allows. Now, some buyers will have a long list of what they want, and I can tell you that only leads to frustration because you're not going to get everything on your list. So don't make home buying so hard on yourself. You've got to be realistic. My recommendation is to choose 3 most important things that you want, the deal breakers. For example, what are the 3 things that you must or you can't live without in this property? Well, usually it's the city that you wish to reside in, the minimum number of bedrooms or the minimum square footage of the property, and if you have kids, then it might be the school district. Or you might want a pool or absolutely not want a pool. So skip all the things that you can add on, like the fence, the pavers, different paint colors, an updated kitchen, new sod. These things should not be deal breakers. You can't change the location, but everything else can be fixed and upgraded. So stay flexible and don't box yourself into wanting something that you're never going to find. Unless money is no object, everything in real estate is a trade-off. A better neighborhood means that either you're going to have to spend more money or settle for a smaller house. If something hits the market that's so fabulous that you got to have it, more than likely it's going to have multiple offers on the property, and the property is going to sell for full price or maybe even more. New or resale, another trade-off, and here it is in a nutshell. A new house has the latest and greatest in energy efficiency, technology, and modern upgrades. It's going to have a smart floor plan and Alexa at your service. The best part is that no one has ever lived there, and you don't have to move in and start fixing anything. On the flip side, the lot will be smaller, the landscape will be barren, and your neighbors will be close enough for you to reach out and touch them. More than likely, you're going to be on the outskirts of town because that's where most of the new construction is going on. So if you do want mature trees, wider streets, bigger lots, and no cookie cutter homes, you're going to have to go to a resale where more than likely you will need to fix or upgrade something. So can you get the benefits of a mature neighborhood being centrally located and the luxury of brand new? Sure you can. You just have to pay more. Making smart offers. Okay, first of all, you have to consider the housing market. Is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? What are you looking for? Are you looking for something that that you can look at 25 properties that have all the same requirements? Or are you looking for something that's very particular, and are you being picky so that maybe there's only A, B, and C? So you have to consider how hard it is to find what I'm looking for. What is the property worth? Now, your realtor should be able to help you with this, maybe not down to the exact penny, but they should be able to tell you how the property is priced or about what the property is worth. Is it priced low, high, too high, or is it a real sweet deal? So what should you offer? Well, if you're in a multiple offer situation, if you don't come in at full price or over full price, you won't get the property. And if you're having financing, you probably still won't get the property either because there are going to be cash buyers. So can you offer less than the full price? Sure you can, but it depends. In other words, if the property is such that it's not going to appeal to everybody or it needs work, sure you can offer less. So how much less? Well, I like to come in reasonably low so that there's room to negotiate. But if you come in too low, you know what's going to happen? The seller's not going to like it, they're not going to like you, and they're not going to want to sell you the property. So then they either counter at full price or they don't counter at all. And they don't care if you want to buy the property. What you do when you come in way too low is you insult the seller and you give them all your power, because now they've got the upper hand, because you now have to raise your price, raise your price, raise your price, or not buy the property and just walk away. So a good buyer's agent will give you advice, and I give my buyers advice all the time, and then they can make the decision that they want. Appraisal issues. Yep, Central Florida has appraisal issues. Properties, about 25% of properties are not appraising for what they're being sold for right now. And it's not because it's necessarily overpriced, because properties in Central Florida have rebounded faster than any other city, and they are appreciating pretty fast. So when an appraiser goes out there, it's just an opinion, and they look at the comparables for the last 6 months, and they come up with a price, or they have a difficulty coming up with a price because nothing is sold in the last 6 months, or maybe nothing is on the market exactly like this property, so they have to go somewhere else, and the comps may not really figure in the real property value. So this is what happens. Let's assume for a minute that you offer 300, or you have a contract for a property for $350,000, and the property appraises for $340,000, which makes you $10,000 short. Now, what we do is go to the seller and try to reduce the price $10,000. Will they? Usually they'll reduce it something. I'm not saying that necessarily they'll take the entire hit, but let's say that they may come down $5,000 and you have to come out of pocket for $5,000. You also don't have to buy the property if you think that you're paying way too much for it, but then you also have to consider, what is the property? Is it a nice property in a nice neighborhood? Well, yeah, the seller's going to sell it for whatever he wants, because there's not that many of those homes out there, and our inventory in Central Florida is being reduced. Less and less properties are on the market. So, you can walk away, but that doesn't mean you're going to find something better for less. All this needs to be evaluated with a good exclusive buyer agent. Study number 4, buying luxury property. So I think a luxury property is anything over $1 million. And the biggest difference between that and a regular property is 2 things: negotiations and inspections. Negotiations. Typically, there's more things to negotiate in a luxury property because they might have a lot more additional items that may or may not stay with the property. For example, expensive chandeliers. I had a deal one time go in the toilet because of a $10,000 chandelier. The seller wanted to keep it and the buyer wanted to take it, and they got into a tiff and the deal didn't fly. So there could be expensive chandeliers, media, electronics, designer furniture, custom drapery, top-of-the-line appliances, or even a fancy car. Now, usually these homes, because of the higher price, are not in a multiple offer situation, so negotiations can be stretched out, and they might even take a few weeks. Sometimes the negotiations may stall, and you can revive them again in a week. Now, inspections will not be the average cost of $500 more or less, and may run into a few $1,000s depending on what needs to be inspected. Now, last year we had a luxury home inspection that took several days and a cost of $6,000 because there were several outbuildings, an airplane hangar, office building, and a hotel-sized pool. Now, add to that any septic tank evaluations, and you have a higher cost for your buying ticket. Now, some mansions come with 6 air conditioners, elaborate technology, elevators, and pool equipment that a lot of pool techs have never worked on. So sometimes you have to bring in extra specialists to properly evaluate the property condition. Now, while inspections could be costly, the credit that we typically negotiate for deficiencies should cover at least the cost of inspections or more. We've negotiated repair credits of up to $30,000 and price reductions of several $100,000. We believe that the buyer should understand exactly what they're buying and what future costs they may incur. So a thorough inspection puts you, the buyer, in the driver's seat. It allows you to move forward with confidence and buy the property. It allows you to maybe renegotiate the contract and ask for a price reduction or some other perks. or you cannot buy the property at all. It's your choice. Next, we're going to have everybody's favorite, which is the bonus section, 7 quick tips to avoid costly mistakes. And I'm going to move rather quickly through this. So, well, maybe not that quickly because this part's important, so I'm going to maybe slow down and say a little bit more. The dirt on new construction. Rule number 1, do not go without your exclusive buyer broker. Builders will all pay the realtors a commission, but they need to know whether you're including your buyer's broker so that they know you have an advocate and that you don't start out by making a financial mistake. So here is the buyer's biggest misconception, and it's a doozy. Many buyers think that if they come by themselves without their realtor, that the builder will discount the property by the cost of the commission, which is absolutely, positively not true. And there's not a single builder in town that will do that. The fact is that without a knowledgeable buyer broker at your side, more than likely you're not going to get the best deal. Why? Because you don't even know what to ask for. You don't know what's negotiable. Now, the builder's agent is friendly, looks good, talks good, and you are going to like them. In fact, I like them. But their job is not to help you get the best deal. It is to sell you on the community. So if you like the community, they're going to ask you to place a deposit on a lot. And typically, they only release a few lots at a time. And they always make sure that you're aware that someone else is looking at that lot. So they create this sense of urgency. And so you'll feel a little pressure to go ahead and put your money down on it. And they're also going to remind you that they've got another price increase coming up. And actually, they do have a lot of price increases, so I'll give them that one. So let's start talking about your choice of lots, since that's the first thing that they're going to ask you to do. How do you even know what a good lot is? First of all lots have what's called a lot premium, and it's an additional cost. Now, lot premiums are typically $2,000, $5,000, $3,000, $10,000, $20,000, and I have seen them go as high as $200,000 for a super duper premium lot. So what do you think a good lot is? Do you think it's the largest lot, a conservation lot, close to activities lot, corner lot, cul-de-sac lot, perimeter lot, retention pond view? Most buyers have absolutely no clue, and the lot premium actually may not tell the story. In other words, the most expensive lot may not necessarily be the most desirable, just like the cheapest lot may not be the worst one there. Secondly, what you see is not always what you get. A few builders will include upgrades in the base price of the house, but sometimes 50% of what you're looking at in the model home may be an additional cost to you. Now, some upgrades are a smart add-on, and you will recoup your money and make money on it when you resell. And other upgrades are a total waste of money, which is the reason that you need to bring your buyer broker with you. One of the reasons. Secondly, you have a 100-page contract that no buyer reads. We read it. Builder agents are not allowed to explain the contract to you, so most of them don't even know what the small print says. Some builder contracts are subject to an appraisal, some contracts are not. Some are subject to financing, others are not. I recently got a call from a client that just got a copy of the contract that she needed to sign. It was 6 p.m. and she was supposed to sign it by 9 p.m. that evening in order to keep the same pricing. So I pulled out my list of 4 things that we were promised, 3 of which were not in the contract. Now, I am not suggesting that this was intentionally omitted, but just think for a minute. 8 months later, when the final touches are being put on your house, do you really think you're going to be able to get the coach lights, the teardrops for the kitchen, or the upgraded wood floors instead of carpet if it's not in the contract? There was a breaking news story last year about a national builder who kept a buyer's $38,000 deposit. The buyer went alone and mistakenly thought that the contract was subject to the closing and funding of his existing home. It wasn't. He didn't sell his home, so the builder kept his $38,000 deposit and resold the property to another buyer. Sad story, but someone on the buyer's side should have read the contract. So do not go to new construction without your exclusive buyer agent. Secondly, do you need an attorney? Well, legally, you don't need to use an attorney, but it's always a smart thing to do. Title insurance, which will be your insurance, is a negotiable item in the contract, and whoever pays for it gets to control who creates the closing documents, which include your title insurance policy. Now, most listing offices have controlled business arrangements with title companies, and these title companies, let's face it, they cater to the hand that feeds them. In addition, Florida is not known for having great title companies. Now, the seller's title agent, they're not going to dig deep for any of your problems, and lately I'm seeing problems simply being excluded from the title policy, which is your title insurance policy. What I'm saying here is that instead of fixing the problem, they just exclude it from your insurance. So it's smart to use your own attorney for closing, or at least have an attorney review all your closing documents. So here's a good story, true one. Mike and I bought a single-family home in Montverde, Florida on Lake Apopka, and during my investigation before I made an offer, I realized that the property had 2 parcels to it. So I was real careful to make sure that the contract included both parcels and that the folio numbers were correct. Now, I let the seller pick the title company because, frankly, I thought I could handle my own review. But then at the last minute, I started thinking about it, and I decided to have an attorney review all my documents. And then the attorney called me and said, "Hey, Eve, are you aware that you are only getting 1 parcel of property?" No, of course, I didn't know. So in reality, the title company was only transferring 1 parcel, and I learned that the other parcel, which was my driveway, the seller was trying to sell to the next door neighbor. So what do you think would have happened if I had closed on that and my seller had already sold half of my property, or at least my driveway, to the next door neighbor? How easy do you think that would have been to fix if it ever got fixed? So be smart and hire an attorney. Don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for a house and then cheap out on having an attorney review it. Inspectors, there's good ones and there's some that aren't that good. So we like to use only the good ones. Now, some of the inspectors will inspect everything and some will only inspect what they have to. Like if there's 15 windows, they'll only check 1 instead of all 15. And then they don't want to upset the seller's agent because they don't want anybody mad at them because they're afraid they're not going to get future business. But you know what? It's not our problem. We like to use inspectors that inspect everything and know what they're doing. One of the things that happens quite a bit is when there are multiple offers on property and everybody thinks they have to have this house. So they will waive like the appraisal, or they'll waive their inspections, meaning that they'll say, "Oh, listen, I won't even do inspections. Please take my offer." Don't ever waive your home inspections. That is not smart. And think of this. Okay, so you waive your home inspections, and then you buy the house and you move in and you find out that it has a subfloor that is full of black mold. And trust me, we just had that happen on an inspection that we did. And if you don't inspect the property, you won't know what it is. Not only will you get sick, but your pocketbook's going to go broke trying to fix these problems after inspections. So if you think you have to waive the inspection in order to get a property, forget it. Just go on to something else. Lenders. Rule number 1, stay off the internet. Just because something is advertised on television doesn't mean it's really the best deal in town. And we often have buyers who think they're getting this really sweet deal from this lender nobody ever heard of, or maybe they have heard of them. And then the story changes right before closing and it's not a sweet deal anymore. So use someone that is in Florida that has been referred to you or recommended to you, and we can recommend several lenders. One of the things that also happens is when you go online and you start putting in your social security number, you don't know who's checking it out, or who's going to charge things on your charge card, or who's going to sell all your information to somebody on another continent. It's not a smart thing to do in today's age. So stay off the internet and use someone that's recommended. Renegotiating after inspections. Now, many buyers think that once they do inspections and they see the problems, that they want the house, they have to buy it with all its problems. Absolutely not true. If inspections are a contingency in the contract, which with us it always will be, and you're not happy with what you find, we can renegotiate. Ask for a price reduction, ask for a closing cost credit, or ask the seller to fix some things. Remember, if the property has structural issues, most of the time it's just best to walk away and buy something else, and there is always something else to buy. Buying a property as is. Most buyers don't understand what that means, and actually most realtors don't either. So buying as is does not mean you need to close on a property that develops problems. Now, sometimes a listing agent will request that you put it on an as-is contract, and what that means is only that the seller is not interested in doing any repairs. It doesn't mean that they won't do any repairs. It just means that they don't want to fix anything, but it doesn't mean that you're stuck with the problems. So don't believe when somebody says, well, you bought it as is. That is a very different meaning than most people think. Walk through prior to closing, and this one absolutely sets my soul on fire because I often read about agents who are talking on these forums that they will never do a walkthrough for a buyer because it's too much liability. And I say, then they should stop pretending to represent the buyer because it is their job. In fact, if you're going to interview agents, that would be a perfect qualifying question. Will you do a walkthrough for me if I'm not available? Do you go to inspections? What will you do if I want to buy one of your company listings? Okay, I'm getting sidetracked here, so let me get back to doing a walkthrough. So let's say you're having a closing tomorrow at noon. Someone needs to walk through the property in the morning, and when you walk through the property, it doesn't mean just walk through the property like, and not look at anything. You can turn the faucets on, you can flush the toilets, you can, open the pantry, you can look in the fridge, you can test the dishwasher. You can check the house over. And we check houses over all the time for our buyers because most of the time our buyers are not around and they're from somewhere else, and so they're not available, and that doesn't matter. It's our job to make sure that the property is in the same condition as when they bought it. So what you're looking for is things that have happened that weren't like that when you bought it. In other words, you have to make sure that appliances are still working, that the seller didn't steal the appliances, that the roof is not fallen in, that the kids in the yard didn't break the windows. Because on walkthroughs, we found that AC no longer cooling, electric not working on half of the house, faucets leaking. Someone left 500 pounds of glass windows in the backyard. They've removed mirrors off the bathroom. So this is your final time to take a look at the property and make sure that this condition is the same as when you bought the property. And at this point, we still have time to renegotiate or get a credit or do something. But how would you feel if you didn't do a walkthrough? Nobody did a walkthrough for you. You closed on the property. You went in and found the place flooded. It's too late. Once you close, the negotiations are over. So today I promised that you would learn the best kept secret that realtors don't talk about, tips for home buyers to avoid costly mistakes, and a proven offer strategy to get your offer accepted. You've learned who to trust or not to trust, and shocking facts about Central Florida brokers. So are you tired of spinning your wheels? Are you tired of driving around calling on for sale signs and getting no one to call you back? That's common. Are you viewing properties that don't fit your needs? Are you not finding what you want? Are you really getting stressed over this? I can remove your stress. In the next 30 days, you can schedule your phone appointment for a complimentary, confidential, no pressure chat about your real estate needs. You'll be glad you did, and I'll be glad to talk to you. You can also talk to Erika. Okay, I admit it, I just love this picture. My exclusive buyer broker gave me the confidence to take the leap. But you know what? It's true. We get calls from buyers who are buying a property, they used another agent, and now they have a problem and want us to solve it. Now, these are not buyers that interviewed us and chose someone else. These are buyers that didn't know we existed. So now that they have a problem, they're doing their homework on the internet and they're realizing there's buyer brokers like us that do take care of the buyer. So they either ask for advice or they think that somehow we can help them, and actually we can't, because now it's time for an attorney to resolve the problem. What would it mean to you to have someone with savvy experience guide you? To have someone you can trust 100%? Wow, doesn't that feel good? Someone that's going to give you advice, advocate for you, and you can trust them. How wonderful will it be to have a loyal partner that will always have your back? And you know what? I always have my buyers back. I have my buyers back even if I don't agree with them, even if I think they're unreasonable, I should say. I still have their back. What will it cost you not to take advantage of what you learned today? Burning money, and it was your money you burned. You have a choice. Now, you've listened to my webinar long enough to understand that buying a home in Florida can be confusing and complicated. It can also be easy peasy. So it's your choice. You can hire a seller's agent who works solely for the seller's best interest. You can hire a transaction broker with no loyalty to you, and they might represent you and the seller in the same transaction. Or you can have your very own exclusive buyer broker, an experienced advocate. No games, no pressure, and never a conflict of interest. Sounds good, doesn't it? And the best part, it doesn't cost you any more to pick either one of these types of agents. In fact, all the commission is paid through the commission split, and it's paid by the seller at closing. So it's your decision. You've worked hard for your money, and it's your money. Why settle for less? Book a call today, and let's chat about your needs. So this is only for people who are serious about home buying, have a minimum budget of $300,000, and want to save time, money, and effort. So why am I doing this? To empower you. I don't want you to go through what I went through the first time I bought a property. And I don't want you to go through what I know buyers go through every day, because we get calls on that have a problem because nobody is advocating for them. So I want to empower you. And you have learned a lot today, and I say you're already empowered. Your bonus gift is to receive a 35-page Florida Home Buyer's Guide, a complimentary no-pressure phone consultation if you choose, and a customized home search sent directly to your inbox. You can book your complimentary call here. I thank you and look forward to talking soon. And on this page is all our contact information. You can book a call here again, or you can read our 5-star reviews. Thank you again. Look forward to talking soon. Have a great day, and good luck to you. Bye.